The soldier who shot Pat admitted in his sworn statement that just before he delivered the fatal burst from about 35 meters away, that he saw his target waving hands, but he decided to pull the trigger anyway. Such an act is not an accident. It's a clear violation of the rules of engagement. Writing up a field hospital report stating that Pat was, quote, transferred to intensive care unit for continued CPR after most of his head had been taken off by multiple 5.56 rounds is not misleading. Stating that a giant rectangle bruise covering his chest that sits exactly where the armor plate that protects you from bullets is being, quote, consistent with paddle marks is not misleading. These are deliberate and calculated lies. Writing a Silver Star Award before a single eyewitness account is taken is not a misstep. Falsifying soldier witness statements for a Silver Star is not a misstep. These are intentional falsehoods that meet the legal definition for fraud. Delivering false information at a nationally televised memorial service is not an error in judgment. Discarding an investigation that does not fit a preordained conclusion is not an error in judgment. These are deliberate acts of deceit. This is not the perception of concealment. This is concealment. Pat is, of course, not the only soldier where battlefield realities reach the family and the public in the form of a false narrative. First Lieutenant Ken Ballard died in Najaf, Iraq, just one day after Pat's fratricide went public. His mom, Karen Meredith, was told that Ken was killed by a sniper on a rooftop. 15 months later, she found out that he was killed by an unmanned gun from his own vehicle. Private Jesse Booty was killed May 5th, 2004 in Iraq. His family was told he was killed in a vehicle accident. A year later, they received the autopsy report, and they found that he was shot in the back. The Army was forced to concede that he was accidentally shot by a Polish soldier. Just recently, out of nowhere, a lieutenant showed up at their family's house and told them that an officer in his own unit had shot him. They are still looking for answers. Sergeant Patrick McCafferty was killed June 22, 2004, from what the family was told as, quote, an ambush by insurgents. 2 years later, they found out that those, quote, insurgents happened to be the same Iraqi troops that he was training. Before his death, he told his chain of command that these same troops that he was training were trying to kill him and his team. He was told to keep his mouth shut. About a year ago, I received a phone call. I was at my mom's house, and it was an emergency breakthrough from the operator. It happened to be a woman named Dawn Hellerman from North Carolina. So it was 2 o'clock in the morning her time. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Brian Hellerman, was killed in Iraq. She was tired of receiving new official reasons why her husband had died. She was desperate for help, so she called us. The system had failed her. Those soldiers deserve better, and their families deserve better. Our family has relentlessly pursued the truth on this matter for 3 years. We have now concluded that our efforts are being actively thwarted by powers that are more interested in protecting a narrative than getting at the truth or seeing that justice is served. That is why we ask Congress, as a sovereign representative of the whole people, to exercise its power to investigate the inconsistencies in Pat's death and the aftermath, and into all the other soldiers that were betrayed by this system. The one bit of truth that did survive these manipulations was that Pat was and still is a great man. He is the most wonderful older brother to ever exist. Pat wanted to leave a positive legacy based on his actions, and he did that. But Pat's death at the hands of his comrades is a terrible tragedy. But the fact that the Army and what appears to be others attempted to hijack his virtue and his legacy is simply horrific. The least this country can do for him in return is to uncover who is responsible for his death, who lied and covered it up, and who instigated those lies and benefited from them. Then ensure that justice is meted out to the culpable. Pat and these other soldiers volunteered to put their lives on the line for this country. Anything less than the truth is a betrayal of those values that all soldiers who have fought for this nation have sought to uphold. Thank you for your time.
I have been asked here today to address misinformation from the battlefield. Quite frankly, it is something that I have been doing since I returned home from Iraq. However, I want to note for the record that I am not politically motivated in my appearance here today. I lived the war in Iraq, and today I still have family and friends fighting in Iraq. My support for our troops is unwavering. I believe this is not a time for finger pointing. It is a time for truth, the whole truth, versus hype and misinformation. Because of the misinformation, people try to discount the realities of my story, including me as part of the hype. Nothing could be further from the truth. My experiences have caused a personal struggle of all sorts for me. I was given opportunities not extended to my fellow soldiers, and I embraced those opportunities to set the record straight. It is something that I have been doing since 2003, and something that I imagine I will have to do for the rest of my life. I have answered criticisms for being paid to tell my story. Quite frankly, the injuries I have will last a lifetime, and I had a story to tell, a story that needed to be told so people would know the truth. I want to take a minute to remind the committee of my true story. Now, I was a soldier. In July of 2001, I enlisted in the Army with my brother, Greg. We had different reasons of why to join, but we both knew that we wanted to serve our country. I loved my time in the Army, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have served the country in a time of crisis. In 2003, I received word that I would be deployed. I was part of a 100-mile-long convoy going to Baghdad. I drove a 5-ton water buffalo truck. Our unit had some of the heaviest vehicles, and the sand was so thick that our vehicles would just sink. It would take us hours to just travel the shortest distance. We decided to divide our convoy up so the lighter vehicles could reach our destination. But first came the city of Nazareth, and a day that I will never forget. The truck I was driving broke down, and I was picked up by my roommate and best friend, Lori Piestua, who was driving our first sergeant, Robert Dowdy. We also picked up 2 other soldiers from a different unit to get them out of harm's way. As we drove through Nazareth, trying to get turned around to leave the city, the signs of hostility were increasing. There were people with weapons on rooftops and street watching our entire move. The vehicle I was riding in was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade and slammed into the back of another truck in our unit. 3 people in the vehicle were killed upon impact. Lori and I were taken to a hospital where she later died, and I was held for 9 days. In all, 11 soldiers died that day, 6 from my unit, and 6 others from my unit were taken prisoner, plus 2 others. Following the ambush, my injuries were extensive. When I awoke at the Iraqi hospital, I was not able to move or feel anything below my waist. I suffered a 6-inch gash in my head. My 4th and 5th lumbar were overlapping, causing pressure on my spine. My right humerus was broken. My right foot was crushed. My left femur was shattered. The Iraqis in the hospital tried to help me by removing the bone and replacing it with a 1940s rod that was made for a man. Following my rescue, the doctors at Lynch, Germany, found in a physical exam that I had been sexually assaulted. Today, I still continue to deal with bowel, bladder, and kidney problems as a result from the injuries. My left leg still has no feeling from the knee down, and I'm required to wear a brace just to stand and walk. When I awoke, I did not know where I was. I could not move. I could not call for help. I could not fight. The nurses at the hospital tried to soothe me, and they even tried unsuccessfully at one point to return me to Americans. On April 1st, while various units created diversions around Nazareth, a group came to the hospital to rescue me. I could hear them speaking in English, but I was still very afraid. Then a soldier came into the room. He tore the American flag from his uniform, and he handed it to me in my hand. And he told me, "We're American soldiers, and we're here to take you home." And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, I'm an American soldier too." When I remember those difficult days, I remember the fear. I remember the strength. I remember that hand of that fellow American soldier reassuring me that I was going to be okay. At the same time, tales of great heroism were being told. At my parents' home in Wirt County, West Virginia, it was understaged by media, all repeating the story of the little girl Rambo from the hills of West Virginia who went down fighting. It was not true. I have repeatedly said when asked that if the stories about me helped inspire our troops, and rally a nation, then perhaps there was some good.